Hi, I'm Netty. It has been a while since my last recorded video like this, and having an EP come out unfixed, I figured now would be the best time to record a bunch of track breakdown videos for each track on the EP. So today we'll be going over how I made my track Turbulence. If you haven't already taken a listen, go ahead and do that for me. Check the description for a link, take a listen, and then come back. But that said, let's get right into it. Alright, let's take a listen to the drop, shall we? Alright, so let's start with the main bass. What does the main bass consisted of? So, this project file was very wacky in the fact that everything is kind of flattened. But not to worry, there is still remnants of the original left, so there's a bunch of processing on this, but we'll get to that later. So, the bass sound of this is this vocoded growly thing. So if we just take a listen without this vocoder. Yeah, it's just a vocoded thing with like a high amount of bands, and it's just a really simple like growly thing that I probably used for another layer, and then I duplicated it. But yeah, this patch is super simple. It's just a monster wavetable with like a filter high pass 12 thing. They're kind of moving to the same point and then like peaking a little bit to distort that peak, and then we have some distortion and a compressor, and some OTT and EQing. And then we add the vocoder, of course. Instant color bass. This vocoded thing is just a simple saw wave with a low detune, it seems. So I recorded that, imported it into here because I wanted to like chop it up in a specific way, which ended up just causing so many complications. So on this group we have some saturation, a reverb rack for like reverb automations, some EQing. And now there's a lot of EQing, as you can see. Just there were like so many peaks. So eventually I just succumbed and used the DSEQ, which is it's like Soothe 2, but then like the poor man's version. Basically like it'll do the exact same thing as Soothe, where it'll just kind of take the peaks of a sound and then just lower them. So if you want Soothe 2 but you don't want to buy it, this is a good alternative. Some dimension expander, extra width, and then some EQs that I'm apparently not using. I believe this has the exact same processing. So these little triplet bits. And then we come to this little part, which this is apparently a cymatics percussion sample. So without processing, it sounds like this. So the resonator is just tuned to like a chord. I'm vocoding it to itself, just on its modulator setting. Just some EQing, OTT, some EQing, and adding a bunch of high end apparently, because it seems like it was a very dull sound before. Saturating it, adding some more width, removing some 5K, removing some 1K, and adding in some mid frequencies. This layer also has like a growly layer to it, a triplet sub layer, and like this extra little like kind of weak high end layer, just to give it a bit more punch. And then there's more, and then it goes right back into the original bass. And then we have like a big chord stack layer, which I suppose is where this comes from. Yeah, so that's one of the layers, which I imagine is just a saw wavetable with like some hyperdimension. Yep. Then we have another kind of a similar layer, but then on like quarter notes. It has kind of a weird EQ on it, which gives it some like more interesting tones to it. Because like I've noticed with saw stacks, like it makes it so much more interesting if you do some like weird EQing to it to give it like a fun vowel, rather than just kind of just leaving it at its stock tone. Because otherwise, like it's just oftentimes it can end up being a very boring sound. Then we have this layer, sub of course. We have a super gritty layer, which is like just a lot of saturation and distortion and stuff. Let's see what the bass patch is. Okay, this is just the growly wavetable from earlier, but then with just a lot of processing. So this is like, this project is actually like well over a year old, but I went in and like revamped it a bit later on, and I think I added this later because I don't think I was using amp at this time. But yeah, anyway, this is just a super gritty bass. Sounds nice. And then this layer comes in, which is like just the most like sad sounding clarinet type sound, which is why this project is called Sad Times, which is kind of the reason why it's called Turbulence, because it's like, you know, you're going through like an emotional turbulence kind of period. I think this is the layer. This is just this. I have no idea what this is. Like, this is like just some, like, is this a saw wave? Is it? I don't know. It's this wavetable. With hyperdimension and distortion and compression. And this, I think this is going through the same processing as the main funky glittery bass, but then just going through modulator instead of external. And then we have a cabinet, which I found is kind of cool for giving it some like extra tonality. So if we turn this off, it can kind of bring out some like cooler harmonics in the high end. Or like remove some certain peaks, which is kind of cool. It can have a really cool effect. Then we have an OTT. A lot of EQing, and I would EQ this a bit more now, but I don't really know how this works. I don't know how this is a functioning thing. But yeah, I recorded that to audio and then tossed it in here. Somehow it works. It's not clipping. It's a mystery to me. And then it fades out, and that's the first drop. Now let's move on to the second drop. So we got a big melodic dubstep switch up. So this chord stack. This has got to be the most cranked thing I've ever made, because I think like I put a LUFS meter on the master, and it went like to like +3 LUFS or some crazy shit. So I had to really tame this. So it consists of this main bass, which we heard earlier. Then we have this thing, just your average sub. Made sure this. Like, I made sure I had enough, like, harmonic content on the sub to where, like, it wouldn't get drowned out by all the other elements. Because, like, with a huge track like this, it's easy to, if you have a lot of elements that are really loud, it's easy to have everything be kind of drowned out. So I did my best to avoid doing that, and I just, you know, included a sub rich with harmonic content. Then we have the chord stack, which is, I think, a patch we heard earlier, but it just has that like weird filter thing. Yeah, the filter really does a lot here, I feel like, for the tone of it. Because without it, it just sounds like, compared to that, you know, it just sounds cooler. I like it more. Then we have this, which I think is the exact same thing, but then without the filter. So kind of cancels it out, to be honest. But then we have this, which doesn't even have any reverb, which is kind of interesting. It's just, and this has so much EQing, it's ridiculous. Yeah, this is like, so this is this like traveling, like this wet position controlled thing. I have no idea what's going on here. I think I just automated it with like several different LFOs to try to get it to like shift around a bit interestingly, but it didn't really translate that well, I think. A lot of distortion, a bit of compression, a bunch of OTT, EQing out the high end, because that high end was deadly. More saturation, more cabinet, which is not, it's not even doing anything, to be honest. But then we have an amp, a fat amp on 7 dBs, which is a bold move. I think without this amp, it sounds vastly different. OTT, EQing out the fundamental for some reason. Turning it up, EQing out a lot of the high end, saturating the shit out of it again, then removing mids from the sides, which I'm just questioning my past self's decisions at this point. I don't know what happened here, but you know, it's all right. Then we have this, EQ, some dimension expander, and a soft clipper, just to make sure it's not clipping, you know, because that's very important in this in this scenario where it's like totally not clipping already. This is sarcasm. But yeah, then we have these little bits. So we have 2 layers here, right? We have this one, which is the clean layer, and then we have this, which is this. What is this? This is the same wavetable. This is the same patch as the melodic dubstep lead, the pitch bending lead. Exact same thing. Nothing has changed. I think all the way through, nothing has actually changed. Yeah, and because of that cabinet, it's got a little bit of a tail. And then we have this one, which I assume is the same thing. Yeah, same thing with just some hyperdimension to make it a bit wide. And then we have an extra lead that comes in. It's this lead duplicated, but then turned into a saw wave to give it like a bit of a different tonality to it. And then we got a bit of a melody variation. And then we're right to the midsection. And then lastly, we have the final drop. So mainly what I think this is just a copy paste of the first drop, but then with like extra layers. So this one, which I imagine is just like a chord stack somewhere that I freezed and flattened. And I guess a little extra ARP thingy that you probably will never hear. And then that little like chord stack thingy. Those 3 elements alone, if we just collapse these and turn them off. Yeah, that beefs it up so much. Like this chord stack alone. Does a lot, like it really beefs it up. Yeah, so I feel like that was like a really important thing to nail in this like specific drop, because like you had the first drop already, like going from a melodic dubstep drop. If I had something that didn't punch through hard enough, then it just wouldn't have worked. I think if I copy pasted the first drop, it would just feel underwhelming. So in this scenario, I like beefed it up a bit, and I think it worked. Yeah, and again, we have the lead thing coming in. Which is the same one from the melodic dubstep drop, just put in this drop instead. Just to kind of like kind of link the 2 drops together, you know, you have the melodic dubstep drop and the color bass drop, and then I wanted to kind of like merge them in a way, and that's also why you have that first hit, like that one, because I think that's just like a modified version of the original the melodic dubstep drop, and then this lead pitches up. And that's it for the drops. So let's move on to like the intro and midsections. Alright, so we start off with this Reese, which is just a very basic Reese. I don't think it has any like mid. This is just, oh, okay, so this is just like your average like 2 voices like Reese thing, and then it's made mono. But then with some hyperdimension and like some extra processing. And then low pass. But yeah, this has a bit of a limiter on it just to keep it from clipping. Then we have this layer, which you kind of hear. It's just kind of like in the background. But this is a thing that's vocoded to this. Which is some really cool chords. Let's just like dive into the music theory of these chords. Like I think what makes these chords really nice is like we start on the 6, right? I think the reason this chord sounds crunchy is because what it's supposed to sound like is this. Basically, this is the same note as this root note. But if you lower that a half step, You get this like, just like really like somber chord, you know? And then you have this chord. I added in this cheeky G sharp, which is a half step below the root major chord thing. So if you turn this off, it's just a jolly old chord, but with that, it's like, ooh. And then we have this like transition chord. But yeah, this is basically going into that, this thing, which originally let's see what this is originally. I was not expecting that. Apparently what this is the growl thing. It's the growl, but then pitched up really high. And it sounds really stupid. So that's vocoded, OTT'd, EQ'd a bit, and that ends up with this. I think I turned the bandwidth down really low on the vocoder to get that like resonant sound. So if we put this back to like 100. I mean, that has its own charm, you know, but like if you put it kind of low, you start to get these like huge peaks, which is really nice. So yeah, I recorded that to audio. We have this, which is the same thing, just, or it's like a chord pad thingy. This is the growl wavetable, but then I have a second oscillator on, which is like a really low octave. Like if you pitch something down really low, you get to hear the individual like spikes of the saw wave. So that's what's happening here. And that's just like a background element kind of filtered out. And then in the background we have a pad, simple pad. We have some like desert storm ambience, which is like, you know, very accurate to the title. Then we have this. I think this is just a pad I made in the project. And then comes this little plucky thing. Which I feel like is like inspired by something. Like there was like this like TikTok that I saw like years ago. Yeah, it's like kind of inspired by that. That's just a little plucky thing, like a sine wavy thing with a bunch of distortion, which makes it a square wave. Then we have an OTT, an LFO tool, which just kind of tightens it up a bit. We have a reverb, which is like a split parallel chain thing. And this is just auto pans. And that's just layered with the original dry signal. So that way we have like a clear dry signal and a clear wet signal. We have some extra delay and just some more EQing. And then we get to the build-up. So this is mainly just some elements kind of copied over. But we have the exact same patch, but just with a different melody now. We have, of course, the classic nitty risers. I kind of hear them coming. They're a bit subtle, but you can hear them coming in. We have this thing, which I imagine what it is just a really stretched out version of like the drop synth. Yeah, I put it on the texture mode because it's like a granular thing. So I just used, yeah, like granular tactics to get this to be like nice and stretched out, but in like a cool way. Then we have these two, which are like being automated with a washout rack, and that's the buildup. And then after the first drop, so it's basically the intro copy pasted, but then there's this little lead over it. Which is a pretty simple lead. It's the melodic dubstep one, as you can see with the bottle blow wavetable. This is kind of just EQ'd out a bit. There's nothing really special on the processing, but then it gets an octave higher. And then we have this like dance lead coming in, which is just like two saw waves at like a high D tune. And then he's coming again. And boom, melodic dubstep. And then for this part, so this part is yet again the intro just copy pasted. Now we have this like granular thing. I don't even really know what this is. I imagine it's this thing. Yeah, it's that thing, but just like pitched up. But you'll notice this vibraphone thing. So this is a splice sample that I just kind of chopped up in a specific way to get it to sound like rhythmically proper to the song. So yeah, this goes an octave up here. And then of course these drum fills. I haven't even talked about the drum fills. This is just a splice sample that I found, TS Neon. So you'll notice this is like not even in like 150 BPM. This is like a mid-tempo thing, but it works for like 150 BPM triplets. So if you stretch this properly, you can get it to sound like triplets, which is kind of cool. I do that a lot with trying to find drum fills. And then we're back in the third drop. Outro is pretty basic. It's the same elements, but just like I've removed some elements over time. And yeah, that's it. One last thing I wanted to touch on was the drums. So for the kick, we have this like kind of like almost house-ish kick. I think like clickier kicks like this work really well with like melodic dubstep or just like, I don't know, this kind of color bassy thing. They're very nice. And then we have the snare that I actually just found out is like made in this project, so I can show you how I made it. But alas, I will not be showing you how I made this snare, and instead I encourage you to check out my Patreon, where you can find an in-depth tutorial on how to synthesize snares from scratch. Not only that though, you get access to a bunch more stuff like monthly sample packs, weekly Friday voice chats, unreleased music, the list goes on. Link is in the description below. We have this little hi-hat playing over top of the whole thing. Just a triple hi-hat. Of course you can't forget about the classic 3 crash loops. But yeah, that is how I made Turbulence. So let me know if you like this with a comment down below, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in another video. Bye.